Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
We have to continue with Europe. Please don't groan. There's plenty of the rest of the hour devoted to non-European stories, but it is without doubt the biggest show in town, and we must stay with it. And it's security. I think what you're going to hear over the coming days, weeks and months is security v sovereignty, destiny versus destruction, fear and promises and concerns on just every which aspect you look at. Let's just focus very much on this idea, and the Prime Minister using the word safer and stronger a record number of times. One newspaper did a word count of what he said, both when he appeared on Saturday outside Number 10 and when he appeared on broadcast interviews yesterday. And the most used word, or two words, I'm so sorry, safer and stronger. And I sense you're going to hear a lot about that. This is a little of what David Cameron said about the importance of keeping our place with European institutions.
We're members of NATO, we're members of the UN, we're members of the IMF. I care about Britain being able to fix stuff. Now, whether it's stopping pirates off the African coast, whether it's closing down illegal migration routes and closing down smugglers, whether it's standing up to Vladimir Putin with sanctions, whether it's the sanctions we put in place to get Iran to abandon its nuclear program, having that seat at the table in the EU, just as being a member of NATO, is a vital way that we project our values and our power and our influence in the world.
Well, one of his key cabinet colleagues, and indeed a former leader of the Conservative Party, Ian Duncan Smith, didn't see it that way.
We've heard a lot of threats coming from those who want to stay in, that somehow this is going to be, less safe because we rely on our security with the European Union. This open border does not allow us to check and control people that may come and may spend time. We've seen what happened in Paris, where they spent ages planning and plotting, so who's to say it's not beyond the wit of man that those might already be thinking about that.
Yeah, well, Sir Hugh Orde, former president of the Association of Police Chief Officers, and he was Chief of Police for the Police Service in Northern Ireland, and he's a supporter of Britain Stronger in Europe, within the last hour told me this.
Well, I think the quiet man should have remained quiet on this one, quite frankly, to suggest the In campaign, which I'm associated with, have been threatening that leaving Europe would make Britain more vulnerable. Is, I think, unfair and inaccurate. It is simply a fact, and I've raised this on many occasions. We have access to joint intelligence, shared intelligence. We can export people through European arrest warrants, including terrorists, we catch in this country. We rely on Europol to share information, and of course Europol has now set up a specific organisation or operation to deal with the new terrorist threat. To step out of, to step out of that would simply render this country far more vulnerable to terrorism, not less.
But surely, Sir Hugh, the level of cooperation we enjoy with the US, which I understand you'll know far better than I, but I understand at times is quite formidable, we'll have the same with Europe. No one's actually going to turn their back on each other.
Well, it's fundamentally different. Actually, we get on very well with our American colleagues. I've attended the most senior courses with the FBI, and they have visited England, and of course they spent some time with me in Northern Ireland, so there's a very good relationship. But that doesn't mean we should deconstruct what is a fairly complex operation across Europe that makes it very simple for frontline cops. There is one system for arresting people for a European arrest warrant across the whole of Europe. It relies on being members. If you're not in the club, you will not benefit from that facility. We export over 1,000 criminals in this country a year using that method. If one looks at the Part 2 countries, as we would call them, countries like the States, it took us 10 years to get rid of Abu Hamza, and that was with the Home Secretary's personal engagement. The notion that we would have this massively complex system across Europe of different systems in different countries would A, be extremely expensive, and B, would take forever.
In the previous hour, and indeed in the first hour, I said we need, the nation needs, not just LBC, the nation needs an independent and unimpeachable body that can say, well, this means that, I appreciate so much is due to interpretation, but it is difficult, and I say again, sense security is going to be a key decider. Let's get some more input on this. Dr. Julian Richards, security intelligence expert at the University of Buckingham, joins me now. Doctor, who's more on track here, would you say? Good morning.
Good morning. Well, in my view, Sir Hugh Ward is very much on track, and the sorts of statements by Ian Duncan Smith and others suggesting that we're more likely to suffer terrorist attacks, they're grossly irresponsible, in my view. And there are two things here, really. There's the points just been outlined by Sir Hugh Ward about there's a lot of very complex machinery in place which works very well in terms of police cooperation across Europe. And the thought of having to unpick and unravel all that and establish new arrangements is quite alarming and would be a very serious issue if we were to leave.
One of my callers not that long ago pointed, though, to the disastrous collapse in broader cooperation between Germany and Paris that allowed the French borders to be stopped the bombers to be stopped on the German border with a boot full of explosives and the sat-nav set for Paris, and nobody said anything to anyone.
No, but we should remember that the UK is not actually part of the Schengen Agreement, so it's not, this...
But that was a disastrous mistake, wasn't it? A lapse, rather, I should say.
Well, it was, but that's an issue between Germany and France. Britain has been in the EU for 40 years.
But if one country can't tell another that literally shares the same border on the same land, if Germany can't tell France, why the hell are they likely to be able to tell someone the other side of the channel?
Well, it's been working very well. We should remember that, and the thought that it's suddenly going to change is ridiculous and frankly alarmist. These are quite irresponsible comments coming out now that are using emotive things like the threat of terrorist attacks to muddy the waters here.
But why can't we enjoy with European nations the same level of cooperation that we enjoy with the US, which I understand to be formidable?
Well, I mean that's a separate arrangement.
But why can't it apply? I don't understand.
We live in Europe. We live next door to Europe. It's the EU countries who are on our doorstep with whom we cooperate on a daily basis, and we would have to change quite a lot of the administrative arrangements there, and it would be rather complicated and unnecessary. But there's another.
But we manage it with America.
Well, that we do, but they're the other side of the Atlantic, so it's a different, there's a different situation.
Well, they cross a bit of, I give you, it's a much bigger chunk of water, but they cross a bit of water.
Yeah, but the situation of individuals moving back and forward.
But why do we bother with Interpol then?
Why do we bother with it? Because we get a huge benefit from it. There is another.
But then Interpol can kick in, surely, Doctor.
No, it's much more complicated than that. The degree of cooperation and interworking with our EU partners is tremendous, and the thought of having to sort of change and unravel and unpick and renegotiate all of that is quite a considerable.
And you don't think that the model set with our relations with Asia, the United States, Australasia, other parts of the world, and the model set with Interpol, it would be beyond the wit of man to base it on those structures?
Well, you could do it, but why?
No.
Why do it? Why? Why?
Well, because many of my listeners were saying it hasn't worked that well. In this case, I remind you of the murder of Alice Gross by the Latvian bodybuilder. I think his name was Zal Kalns, as I recall. Didn't work too well there, did it?
These are red herrings. The thought that we can be Fortress Britain and have completely...
No, never that. But you want to use I would imagine you'd want to deploy or employ every possible barrier and every possible guard that you could, wouldn't you?
Well, of course, and our border security is very strong, and it has been pretty effective. You can't stop every single person coming in who's going to commit a crime, and whether you're in the EU or not, that makes no difference to that.
But doesn't the membership of the EU, with the arrival of what is thought to be a number of IS militants who are hiding among, posing as these migrants, isn't that surely a concern in that they will get easier access to Britain?
They won't get easier access to Britain. I don't see how they would. I don't see that, that the movement of refugees...
Because once they get their European citizenship, they can come to Britain unchecked.
They can do that now if they want to.
Well, then they do. Well, I'm glad you make my earlier point then. So it is easier for them.
The point is that whether we're in or not is a spurious argument when it comes to security threats, and particularly individuals moving up from Syria or Iraq. The threat from those from those factors is nothing to do with our membership of the EU, and whether we leave or stay will make no difference to that whatsoever. These are spurious arguments that are being brought in to frighten us and muddy the waters on this particular debate, in my view.